good morning or afternoon or evening, however, whatever time it is at your house. Um, this is Tom Johnson, of course. You can see that if you're looking at the video. Uh, and I'm hoping to create a video to take the place a little bit. Obviously, can't take the place as far as discussion goes for the Monday study group to have some kind of presentation I can make that will um, perhaps add some clarity or information that you may not have already got in your study. I may ask some questions and answer them as best I can, and I already have the study questions that you should have received, and I thought I would just use that initially as the format. And then if everything goes well and you can actually see this video and it's not too big a file, I'm going to upload it to YouTube. That's my hope. Save it and upload it to YouTube so that it may be like, I don't know, this one will be shorter just because we want to test it. But after that, maybe there'll be like 30 minutes or so. And if you want to view that video, you can. So we left off at Matthew chapter 20 and verse 24, right in the middle of uh, the passage about the request of the mother of James and John that her two sons be um, seated, one at the right hand and one at the left when his kingdom comes, which I thought was rather humorous that either they sent their mother to do the asking for them or it was all her idea and she showed up to make sure her boys got first consideration. We read that and we read the glib answer that the disciples said that they were able to drink the cup that Jesus said being first and second would require them to drink. And I think in Mark it said, and are you able to be baptized with the baptism that I'm to be baptized with? And they said, we are able. So Jesus disappointed them by saying that he didn't have that authority to give those positions to the disciples. That's interesting in light of him being the second person of the Trinity. But at this point in his humanness, he says that that honor of being first and second in his kingdom was something that's been prepared for um, other people, maybe even for them, but he couldn't grant it. It had been prepared by his Father. Well, then we start verse 24, and I'm using the NRSV. You may use any translation you wish, but I'm using the NRSV. So when the 10 heard it, they were angry with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you, but whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be your slave, just as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This passage is also pretty close to this same wording in Mark. There are some small changes, and if you're using a gospel parallels, I encourage you to do that comparison and look at some of the differences, things that Matthew has added or left out as he was using Mark. The passage also appears in Luke. In Luke, it looks like it's in chapter 18 and verses 24 and following, if I'm reading that right. A dispute arose among them over who was the greatest. It doesn't say the James and John story. And then pretty much what Jesus says about the kings of the Gentiles lording it over them and so forth, and that among the disciples, your greatest must become like the youngest. That's different in Luke. And your leader must be like one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. That's those last two verses, Luke 18:27. I guess it's just 18:27. That's not in Matthew or Mark. This thing about the table and who's greater, the one sitting at the table or the one serving, and it's usually thought that the one obviously being served is greater, but Jesus says he is among you as one who serves. Um, Back in the day, when I was teaching at George Fox University from 1997 to 2008, we had an annual Serve Day uh, in September, usually the second Wednesday in September. And that last verse from Luke, that last little part, but I am among you as one who serves, was the theme that the president spoke to the whole student body. We all gathered on the lawn, the students and the faculty and the staff. We all gathered on the lawn outside the student union, and there was a stage set up, and the president spoke about this passage from Luke and encouraged those who would be participating in Serve Day to remember that Jesus said, I am among you as one who serves. And then all the students and faculty and many of the employees left campus and went out to homes and churches and businesses in the surrounding community in south of Portland and did serve projects, everything from outdoor maintenance to roofing to cleaning moss off roofs, cleaning churches, sweeping things out, repairing things, all kinds of projects that the students with usually an adult, older adult university teacher or employee as the leader of the group went out to their assigned project and worked all day until mid-afternoon when everybody came back to campus and talked about the service that they did. And there was usually a dinner served, informal dinner served on the lawn, and we all sat and talked about serve projects that happened that day and any adventures that occurred during these serve projects. But anyway, so this passage, both all in all the Gospels, Jesus, even in Matthew and Mark, says the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So this whole passage has been an important one. Well, it seems as if, back to verse 24 then, and I asked why would the other disciples be angry with James and John, the obvious answer there, it seems to me, is that they were jealous, that they hadn't thought of this themselves. They might have wanted to be first and second in the kingdom. They could have decided that this effort on the part of James and John to assert their independence or superiority was annoying, at least annoying, and if not, maybe something worse than that. But so they began to be angry with James and John, and Jesus senses this competition, the spirit of division and annoyance and anger among the disciples, and he knows that this is not how he wants his community to be, his people to be. So Jesus called them together, it says, and said to them, let's think about leadership and how we see it and in the world in which we live. And he cites the fact that the Gentiles, which would be largely the Romans who would have been visible in most towns and villages, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem where there will be lots of Roman presence. And he says to them, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Lord it over them. I was looking up the Greek on that. I have here the Greek text of that. And he called his disciples to him and said, you know that the archons, the rulers of the ethnon, the Gentiles, kata kuriusin, you hear the word kurios in there, the word for Lord. have power over or lord it over someone. It's an oppressive word. It implies that the model of leadership and power, the exercise of power among the Gentiles, was one that Jesus didn't approve of. It's a pejorative term. They exercised power over them, and their great ones, their megaloi, you can see the word mega or great in there. Their megaloi, their great ones, uh, exercise authority over them. So there's this hierarchical concept, right? Of lordship, people who do the lording over, and people who are lorded over. A kind of hierarchical relationship, and that's what he says characterizes the Gentiles. Um, but then he says that it will not be thus among you. It will not be this way among you. Um, of course, did that actually happen? Um, is the practice of authority in the church hierarchical? Have bishops and others lorded it over people? Pastors lorded over people? There are certainly many examples of abusive churches and of moments in the history of the church when the church has acted more like the lords of the Gentiles than the way Jesus thought his disciples should act. But he said, "It will not be so among you, but whoever wishes to be mega among you," remember, megaloi was the great ones that was used in the previous verse, but whoever wishes to be great among you will become your diakonos, your servant. We get our word deacon from diakonos, your minister, your servant. And whoever wishes to be protos first among you uh, will be your slave. Doulos is the word there. So minister and slave are the appropriate roles for those who want to be great or first. Uh, and that's the way Jesus views the exercise of authority among his disciples. So he's not wanting them to adopt the cultural model that is so evident and visible in the rule of the Gentiles. His observation in verse 25 about the nature of Roman government is not a positive one. But in Jesus' movement or his community or his ecclesia, his church, verses 26 and 27, rule and authority looks like service and ministry and maybe hard work and not a lot of perks and sitting at my right hand and sitting at my left hand. So it differs pretty strongly from Roman perks and privileges and the exercise of power to control and manipulate people. So servant, minister, diakonos. In many churches, the deacons are those who care for people in need. And that's an appropriate role for those who are followers of Jesus. And slave or servant are those who do whatever needs to be done, right? Without regard to saying, well, I'm the pastor or I'm the elder or deacon or bishop. I can't or shouldn't have to do those things. I often thought that um, when I was a leader on a couple of campuses that I was a part of, there shouldn't be any job on campus that the president or any of the vice presidents shouldn't be willing to do, include cleaning the bathrooms, uh, wiping the gym floor, whatever it is, picking up trash on campus. Um, I tried to instill in people that sense of that they were there to serve, even though they had titles and were paid for what they did. They were actually there to serve the whole campus community and should be willing to do whatever needed to be done. And it seems to me that has strong implications for the Jesus movement today, for what we as Christians need to think is our responsibility. And not just the elected leaders in our church, but all of us are able, maybe even called by Jesus, to look at leadership as a matter of service and of doing whatever needs to be done. So it seems like this verse does offer a basis for an idea of authority that Jesus sets out, and that basis is his own example. I am among you as one who serves, he says in Luke, or the Son of Man, your master, your Lord, your teacher, I, the Son of Man, came not to be served, though perhaps by his divine position he would deserve worship and service. But he says he came not to be served, uh, but to serve and to give his life. Um, and that's what we do when we serve. We give our lives, our time, our energy, our money, whatever it takes to get the job done as best we can. And some of the tasks are too big, obviously, to do alone. So we join together as a community and seek to do things together, just like you all did this December when you all joined together and we gave a major contribution to the Pacific Rim Institute. So uh, our basis for this idea of authority and ministry is Jesus' own life. He gave his life as a ransom for many. Um, the Gospels themselves, unlike Paul's epistles, let's just say the Synoptic Gospels and leave John to one side, the Synoptic Gospels uh, don't articulate a theory of the atonement, of the death of Jesus, like Paul does. Paul and Hebrews and other New Testament letters have explicit theories of the reasons why Jesus died and what his death accomplished. We don't find that very much in the Synoptic Gospels. This is one of the only verses that even alludes to the fact that Jesus was to give his life as a ransom for many. A ransom is something paid to set people free. Um, and we don't know if that, speculation was, well, who did the ransom get paid to? The devil to let people free who had kept people in bondage? And um, but that's never really explicitly spelled out anywhere else. It's more of a metaphor to say what Jesus was all about was setting people free. In his life, he set people free from illness and disease and idolatry. Think of people like maybe Matthew and Zacchaeus and others who um, were tax collectors and valued money and wealth, and these things all wind up oppressing people. So Jesus came to set people free from whatever oppresses them. He gave his life as a ransom for many. And speculating about who it was paid to and what the price was, and that well, the price was obviously his life, right? But not just his death, but his life um, was paid as a ransom for many. All right, well, that takes us through verse, 28, and we begin a new section with verse 29. So I think I'll stop the video here. That's only been about 18, 19 minutes, and we'll see if it works. And I'll try to upload it to YouTube and then give you the YouTube link and see if you can view it and if you think it was useful. We're not going to meet on Mondays, so this might be a poor substitute for the group discussion, but it's something. And let's see, let's see how it works. And please give me feedback. So, what could have been better? Um, could you upload it? Did you have problems with your computer uploading it? Was it too long? Anything, let me know. But I've enjoyed trying this, and we'll continue it and go on with the next section if this works and if we think it's valuable enough. All right, take care, and I'll stop the recording now.